What if the most effective way to decarbonize our energy sector isn't through a new discovery, but a smarter way to deploy the technology we already have? In Alberta, the oil and gas industry is the socio-economic heartbeat of our rural and urban communities. But as the world demands lower carbon energy, operators are facing a difficult transition. Many mid-sized players are stuck in a cycle of wait and see due to regulatory uncertainty, while others find themselves trapped in endless pilot projects without the capital to scale up. To break through these barriers, Emissions Reduction Alberta has launched the Methane Reduction Deployment Program, or MRDP. This $22.4 million initiative, funded by the TIER program, helps companies move past small-scale pilots into full commercial adoption of proven off-the-shelf technologies. By de-risking the cost of upgrading technologies such as chemical pumps and pneumatic devices, the program aims for a target of 20% reductions in methane emissions. We sat down with Blake Wickland, Executive Director of the Methane Emission Leadership Alliance, to talk about how this program acts as a bridge between government policy and field operations. With over 30 years of experience, Blake shares why Alberta's history of innovation positions us as a global leader in methane reduction and why the time to modernize is right now. Here on Carbon Copy.
My name is Blake Wickland. I'm the Executive Director of the Methane Emission Leadership Alliance. In the Methane Reduction Deployment Program, I'm acting as business development and industry outreach. We're really going for heavy outreach into industry on this one and really be actively engaged with industry. So it's pretty exciting. It's a fun role.
Now, you've been in the oil and gas industry for over 30 years, starting as an instrument mechanic in Drayton Valley. Can you walk us through that journey and how a trades background informs your perspective on methane reductions today?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I'll say that. It's if I go way back, it's almost like I was born into the trade. My dad was an instrument mechanic as well. He spent a lot of time in the oil field. In about the mid-90s, with a company called Syntec, I started working in the shop and actually at about 13 years old. Hopefully nobody's on labor standards on this podcast, but I was about 13 years old and rebuilding some of the devices that we are actually replacing today. Chemical pumps, pneumatics, things like that. I started working in the field fairly young, kind of helping out. Went to NATE, got my instrumentation ticket. Went the apprenticeship route, which anybody listening, I would love to say, get a trade. The trades are good, no matter what is said. I think finally trades are actually getting popular and getting to be something that people want. So I'm really happy to see that. I grew up in Drayton Valley. We started, there was, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 of us that were in on the ground floor and started a company called Tarpon Energy Services in 2003. Worked in the field, and then I moved down to Calgary, worked in the field a little bit, and then went through multiple different roles over my career. So we started a little special projects group where we would do projects that needed a little extra attention. From there, went into some design work, QA, QC, estimating. I used to say if there was a problem, that's pretty much what landed on my desk, and we'd have to solve that problem. So, it's been a great career, I would say. I don't regret a minute of it.
Right on. Now, you've shared some of your experience working in Alberta, but I understand you also worked in the Middle East. What led you onto the methane reduction path in 2017, and why haven't you looked back since?
Yeah, so once we started doing some of these, this design work, I guess, and that was primarily for companies in the Middle East. So we built a lot of plants in Iraq, Kuwait, Yemen. We did work in Nigeria, Kuala Lumpur. We were all over the place. So we got a good perspective of what happens around the world as well, which was really nice to see. Methane, I almost stumbled into it by accident, to be honest. So 2010, I was doing some work with Sean Hebert, who a lot of people know. Sean's fairly well renowned in this space, and also Milos Korniaya. And they were doing a bunch of RemView AFR installations on compressors. So we were essentially at that point reducing methane without really being the focus on methane. The focus was more on making the engines more efficient. So that was really the very start of it. And then I had a coffee and a conversation with Brian Van Vliet. I'd like to give a little shout out to BVV as pretty iconic in this space. So
Spartan Controls, yeah.
Yeah, it was Spartan. Me and BVV had a coffee, and he was talking about this methane stuff that's going on and carbon offsets. And I came out of it probably equally confused and excited. Because I didn't know what I didn't know at that point. Then I got introduced to both Blue Source and CapOp, who is now, Blue Source is now Anu, CapOp is BMO Radical, and they were going to be doing these large-scale pneumatics programs, which sounded really exciting. And as a guy in the service industry, that sounded like we could probably get some guys out there and get some hours. I went to my boss at the time, Jason Nolan, and we had a little chat, and I said, I think this could go somewhere. I think this could be big business for us. And luckily, Jason just said, yeah, go for it. So I, was able to kind of drop all the other stuff I was doing and just focus solely on methane. And now we're here. So it's been quite a ride over the last number of years, kind of understanding the industry and bringing a little bit of a different perspective into it as well from that, field experience and tying the office and the field together.
Maybe switching gears here a little bit. So despite broad agreement on environmental goals, policy effects often show varying results across regions. As someone from Drayton Valley and having that international experience as well, how vital is the oil and gas sector to the socio-economic life of rural communities?
Yeah, I think our environmental responsibility and oil and gas can really go hand in hand. I don't think that we have to have one or the other. I'll say that right away. I think in Alberta, we have shown, massive leadership in this. Oil and gas in these small communities, and this is something that I've kind of preached a lot, is just the importance of oil and gas in our small communities in Alberta. Every hockey team that I grew up playing on, every sports complex, fields, all the things you did were sponsored by either an oil company or a service company. And the trickle down effect is huge. And I think that's something that, coming from a small town, I think that's something that kind of gets lost in urban life in the city is, if a small store closes, some people will notice, but you probably move on relatively quickly. When oil and gas closes down or a company shuts down in one of these small towns, the trickle down to the service companies is there. And then the guys that, clean your coveralls or clean the offices right down to the restaurants and the hotels, it really affects the entire community. So, it's hugely important. And I think it gets a little bit lost that the good that oil and gas does for these communities, it's huge, the investment that they actually put into the community.
Yeah, in policy discussions, we often hear about shifting jobs from one sector to another. Why is it important for decision makers to consider the local trickle-down effects, as you spoke to, and the specific human impact when an industry must adapt to new standards?
Yeah, you can't tell a baker that the next day he's going to be a welder. Right. I think that's something that might get ignored a little bit, is that, we look at some of these regulations and don't get me wrong, I think the regulations are a good thing. I think we do need to get cleaner and we can get cleaner. And I think there's an appetite to do it. But when I see things in a regulation, like a statement that said, well, you'll lose some jobs over here, but you gain them back over there, that's not necessarily the same jobs, right? So if the guy that's driving the tank truck loses that job, he can't just necessarily go and become an LDAR guy. It's two different skill sets, right? So I think there's a very careful balance there that we have to look at and ensure that we do protect those jobs and create other jobs that are attainable for folks.
You stated that the vast majority of industry players are eager to adopt cleaner practices, but often face hurdles. How does Alberta's history of leading rather than reacting position us to be a global partner in setting high environmental standards?
I think as Albertans, we always want to be leaders. And I've seen that in the industry over the last number of years, right? So if I go back to 2017 and see all the work that was being done, really voluntarily. I mean, carbon offsets were a big portion of it. Let's be honest about that. But it was private investment coming in and actually doing this work. And I believe that companies do want to be better, right? And Alberta wants to be better, but we need to do it in our way. I think nobody knows the oil field better than we do. And it's really difficult when regulations come down that, even though they're well thought out, I won't say that somebody didn't think them out. It gets very difficult when maybe they don't fully understand what the operations look like. And what I mean by that is we might say, okay, yeah, well, you can just replace this instrument with this instrument, but they don't understand that instrument doesn't work when it's minus 50 or that solar power is maybe not the ideal thing in certain parts of the province, right? So we have parts of the province like Brooks, great solar power, fantastic. You get up by Edson, not so much, right? So I really do think Alberta wants to lead in this, and I think we have been the leader in this. You just see all of the work that's been done, all of the projected work that is to come in this space, that we really do want to do it. We just kind of want to do it our way. And I believe that the methane reduction deployment program is one of those kind of signals from the government of Alberta that, yeah, we want to do better and we want to actually be the leader. I think there's a difference between being the leader and being the follower.
Yeah. Right.
We want to, the leader gets ahead and just does the work and gets it done and shows everybody what they can do. The follower waits till everybody else does the work and then decides, okay, well, we might do it now. So I really think that this is a really good signal from the GOA that, we want to be that leader and want to continue to be that leader.
Interesting. So I guess, how do you see the methane reduction deployment program serving as a collaborative bridge between the goals of government and the operational realities of the people working in the field, as you described?
Yeah, I think this just helps pave the way, right? So over the last few years, if we go back to, say, 2023, when all of the requirements of Directive 60 came in, right? So now Directive 60 is fully implemented January 1, 2023. As of then, there became a little bit of uncertainty of what's next, right? So we've improved our operations, we've done this, but what's next? I think that the MRDP will really help pave the way to what's next. So companies are looking at things like their chemical pumps, right? I think that's going to be our next low-hanging fruit. We're also looking at methane slip. We're looking at all these different technologies, but companies are a little bit weary because, well, what does that next regulation look like? And how do they prepare? So if they put an investment in one bucket and then the regulation comes out and they really don't need that bucket anymore, that was a bad investment. So they get a little hesitant, where with this funding, it helps de-risk that investment essentially and gives them a chance to maybe try out technology that is commercially available. And I think that's an important piece of the MRDP is this technology is off the shelf, ready to go, proven technology. It's not something that we necessarily need to pilot all the time or anything. Like, it is ready to go. You just have to see how it works in your operations. So I really think that it'll help pave the way and kind of get ahead of that next batch of regulations and really position our companies to still be competitive. And I think it also, helps companies adapt those operational changes that will happen. Because there is no doubt that when we put in this technology, we put in anything, it's going to change the way you do your job a little bit, right? When we went from having books full of CDs in our cars, and I know you're both the same vintage as me, so you had one too. We had to adapt when the MP3 player came out. It was different. But you look now, and we've all but forgot about CDs, essentially, and MP3 is just the way that we do things. So it's adapting those operational changes and learning that some of these devices have kind of ancillary benefits outside of just the methane reduction. I'll take chemical pumps as a fantastic example of this. Yeah, do they take out pumps that are actively venting methane and vent a ton of methane, really? They remove those. Okay, great. That's the environmental benefit. But we also now have the ability to remotely change our injection rates. We can really manage our chemical usage a lot better than we could before. We can do things like active freeze protection, where the chemical pump automatically drops its injection rate and then increases the rate as needed if it gets cold outside. Because I know this morning, I was out feeding horses this morning. It was -15 and it's going to be -1 in the afternoon. So you'd probably want to have, a higher injection rate overnight just for freeze protection, lower it during the day, and there can be huge operational cost savings in that. So, I think there's so many ways that this program is going to help industry. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Now, you and I have both spoken about the methane reduction deployment program, and we're quite familiar with it, obviously. But maybe for those listeners who are unfamiliar with it, what's the core mission of this program, and how is it structured between ERA, the Methane Emission Leadership Alliance, and Modernize Advisory?
Yeah, so the program, I think this is a pretty big question. So essentially what the program is $22.4 million worth of funding out of the tier fund. And I think that's a very important thing to understand, is that this money is coming from industry that was paying for emissions, and it's going back into industry to help reduce those emissions. And I think this is something that gets a little bit lost, is that Alberta has actively had tier or the different iterations of it since 2007. And I think that's very, very important and something that we should be very proud of. So that tier funding was deployed to ERA, on behalf of the government of Alberta, to deploy that to industry through a process, Modern Advisory, and I came in under my Mila banner, but Modern Advisory is the delivery agent. So essentially helping design, evaluate, audit, and execute the program alongside ERA, and in a very collaborative environment. I'll say it's been a pleasure actually working with the whole team at ERA and on the marketing, on the technical side, everything. It's been great. So yeah, it's a real collaborative effort to deploy this out to industry.
As the lead for business development and industry outreach, you're the public face of the MRDP. You have stated that you can speak both CEO and operator. For a program like this to be successful, why is it essential to bridge the gap between these two perspectives?
Yeah, that's something I've said quite a number of times, is that I can speak both CEO and operator. And I think it just lends itself to, the bit of eclectic career that I've had, is that, I worked out in the field for a long time. And then I also worked downtown and in the offices and in executive leadership. So, those two different groups, sure, they both speak English, but it's very different English, essentially. And what I mean by that is that there's just different values, different goals that they have, right? So the operator that's going out this morning to look at all of his wells out in the field and make sure everything's running properly, I mean, his primary goal is reliability of that field. Being safe, being responsible, being reliable, keeping everything running. The CEO, he has different goals. He can't worry himself with the operations in the field, the day to day. He can't worry about every individual well. He's got bigger things that he needs to worry about, like, investors and making investors happy and keeping the company running from the top down. And I think it's really, really important for those two groups to understand how their decisions can impact one another. And I think that's where it gets really important when we are making decisions, say from Calgary, and we're saying, okay, we're going to go and we're going to put in all of these chemical pumps. Well, you need to understand when you are putting in these chemical pumps, how that's going to affect the operators. And maybe that helps your decision on which device or which model, how you configure it. It is going to have an impact on their lives. And I think that once they understand it and you help them understand it, you educate them on it, then they can adapt to it. But just shoving a bunch of changes down and saying, just, deal with it, that doesn't get anybody anywhere. All that gets is everybody being mad at each other. So, I'm a big advocate for when we're making these project decisions and really developing all these projects, involve operations all the time, right from the ground up. Understand how your decisions are going to impact their lives, how it could make their lives better, and help them understand as well how it could make their lives better and easier. And from the top end, same thing. They can understand how it's going to make that CEO or, VP production guy, it can make everyone's lives better when we do this. We just have to understand what's everybody's goals, what do you need out of this, and how can we make that happen? Mm-hmm. And I think it's very, very important to collaborate from the top down. There's companies out there that I've seen that do this in a fantastic way. I think Tourmaline, I'll call them out. They are one of the greats at doing this. I know back in the early parts of my career, Vermilion Energy was one as well that most of their engineers or all of their engineers went out and actually operated wells for a couple of years. So they understood exactly how it worked in the field, and they could, understand what their decisions were doing when they would make decisions afterwards. So, right. Yeah.
Unlike a single technology pilot, the MRDP focuses on deployment at scale. How does this program help companies move past pilot projects into large-scale commercial adoption?
I have a really tough time with the pilot projects. I'll be honest, right? So I think that to me, a pilot project means you're trying out something that's new that you're not really sure it's going to work. Yeah. The MRDP is very focused on commercially available tech. So, if we were, again, I'll pick on chemical pumps because they're easy. If you're going to put out pumps in there and you say, we got to do this as a pilot project. Well, there's lots of them out there already. I think they've been piloted. You can do this. Now there is other projects that are true pilot projects, right? And how we get past pilots into commercial, large scale commercial adoption, it can be difficult. I think what this is going to do is really de-risk that first part of the investment. It's that first little push towards wanting to go and actually do the work, and the ability with $1 million available, per project, per participant, it gives you the ability to essentially invest a $2 million project. Some of these projects, such as methane slip, one project is going to take up quite a bit of that $1 million. So maybe you only get a few of those done. Other projects like instrument gas conversions to whether it be nitrogen or instrument air or electrification, you can do a large scale deployment with that kind of money and really start changing your operations, which then essentially you get to learn how it impacts your operations. Now you can help design all of your greenfield to be the same, right? And you can really test out in the brownfield, and that's going to adapt into the decisions that you make for the greenfield. So yeah, I think de-risking that investment is a huge part of it, and just allowing large scale deployment with some funding so that you can essentially adapt your operations to the new way of doing things and really move into the future.
Right. And maybe just based on my own personal experience, previous programs, I find the success stories that come out of programs like this often help other companies maybe move forward with projects that they were considering if they see someone else has tried it and got funding for it and did it successfully. So looking forward to some of those success stories coming out of the MRDP as well. Maybe shifting gears here a little bit. You mentioned that technology adoption nearly stalled around 2023 due to regulatory uncertainty. Can you explain what the wait and see mentality would impact a program like MRDP?
Yeah, it's investment risk is what happened in 2023. So we had large scale projects go on between, say, 2017 and 2023. We saw huge movement in the industry. After 2023, again, like I said before, we were in a state where, the regulations are fully implemented. Those projects are kind of wrapping up. And then we're into what's next? And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, we haven't really seen what's next until very recently. I think when they're looking from, say, the C-suite level at investing, what's the solid investment at that point? If you don't know what's next in regulation to reduce methane, what is your solid investment? Well, probably the drill bit and infrastructure at that point. So the two of those things are very much kind of clashing. And if you don't alleviate essentially that uncertainty, what are you going to do? You're just going to say, okay, well, this is our safe bet, so let's invest over here. Right. And I think that's what really caused that stall. And not saying that there's companies that haven't been doing things, because there's been a lot that has been going on completely voluntarily. Even within the carbon offset system, there was still things after 2023 that you could do and develop carbon offsets from. So, by stall, we're still rolling a little bit, right? We stalled, but we're still rolling down the highway, essentially. We're just going a little slower and slower. So I think this will, start that engine back up and we can get moving again. And we are starting to see some of that uncertainty go away as well, politically. And I'm excited to see what the future brings.
So we spoke about 2023 and now we're in 2026. And as you know, Canada and Alberta have committed to finalize a methane equivalency agreement by April 1st as part of a broader memorandum of understanding signed in November 2025. What do you think will be the impact on the MRDP?
So I think this one can go a couple different directions. I'll start with the negative direction, I guess. If regulations came in and they were very heavy-handed and immediately implemented, so January 1, 2027, that could have a negative impact on the MRDP in the long term. I think in the short term, it might get people spurred to get their applications in and get the projects going. But I really don't believe, in my heart, I don't believe that's what's going to happen. I think the province and the feds are working together very well now. Historically, maybe not. I don't want to get too political on this one, but I think historically, we all know the difficulties that were there. But I really believe that, this could be very good for the program. And with that, if we have a runway like we did back in 2023, when the regulations were developed, say in 2017, 18, 19, the AER really heavily collaborated with industry. And they have a fantastic methane team over there. A lot of really good people. And I had the pleasure of being on the technical committee for that one. And they developed a runway. And that runway gave everybody a view, 5 years into the future of, okay, this is what you're going to have to do, but you have some time to do it. At that time, what it did was open up the carbon offset market and, brought private investment in to the industry to, do large scale pneumatics programs. What that could do for the MRDP is give everybody a really good view of what's going to happen, let's say in 2030. So that gives us 4 years, which is crazy to say that 2030 is only 4 years away. And we had some sessions at the start of this year with GOA that, we were talking about all this, and it was AER and GOA. Everybody was in the room. And I think I kept saying every single meeting, there's this many days to 2027. There's this many days to 2030. And it was very surprising when you really look at it that way. It's not that far away. So if we can get a view of what we're going to have to do in 2030, we can get it done right now through the MRDP, right? So I think it helps everybody prepare for the future, really helps them make those decisions and get out. Unfortunately, right now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen between now and April. It's going to be quite exciting to see what happens. And, we'll be actively engaging on that and trying to lend our expertise where possible. But again, I have a lot of trust in the AER that they're going to put together something that's really going to work well for industry. That methane team is very strong over there, and have some really good leadership. So I think they're going to put together something that's really going to work and probably strengthen our program more than anything. But, I'll just tell everybody, get your applications in. You might as well. Let's not wait for this. Let's just get our applications in and get moving on this stuff.
So we've had a chance to talk about regulation quite a bit, but I guess beyond regulation, what are the primary financial or technical barriers preventing a mid-size operator from reducing their methane footprint today?
Yeah, we've harped on this investment piece a lot, and that is legitimate, right? Is where do you put your investment? So that's a barrier for operators, but I think there's also one in the change away from the business as usual approach. Right? We all get fairly comfortable in how we do things and how we design in the field, what our operational approach is, what all those old designs out there look like. I mean, when I was in Drayton Valley working, there's all these stations called the Pimbalta stations, and they were built in the 50s, some of them, right? And we were working on vessels out there that were built in the 50s and switches that were built in the 50s. And we're very comfortable with this. This is the business as usual approach. But to try and change that, that requires a bit of a change of mindset for us to go and take something that we're very comfortable operating. We know how it works. We know that. Changing that mindset and trying something new, trying to change your operations, that's a big barrier that you have to get past. And I think it's programs like this that allow you to change that, change those barriers, change the way that you're doing things, and not necessarily have to put in the entire investment to do so. It's somebody lending you a helping hand, essentially, to try and change your operations and help you into the future.
Right. Now, you've talked quite a bit about your experience in Drayton Valley, and I know you've used some examples from chemical pumps, but can you maybe share a success story or a case study from your experience where a company wanted to innovate but lacked the specific support that a program like MRD now provides?
Yeah, I think that we can go back, and if we're looking for a big success story, it's the carbon offset program, from 2017 moving forward. It was the combination of a really good regulation, really good timeline, and, published documents from AEPA that allowed us to develop offsets and bring in private investment. And that really showed large scale deployment. There was tens of thousands of pneumatic devices that were changed in that time. Right. And I think those stories, those success stories, I'll go off on a bit of a tangent here, is I think we should be very proud of those. And as Albertans, I feel like we're almost a little bit humble at times where we don't necessarily vocalize those success stories all the time, and we really should. I've told a story many times before where I was at my aunt's house in Kelowna and just catching up with the family, and their friends were over and stuff, and one of her friends just kind of asked what I was up to. And I said, oh, well, we're doing these large scale projects where we're replacing these pneumatics and reducing methane emissions. And she said, oh, okay, well, tell me more. And so I kind of, told her these things are about the size of a laptop. On the average, they'd replace like 35 cars, take 35 cars off the road kind of thing, right? And, by the end of the conversation, the one thing that she said to me was, well, why don't we ever hear this? Mm-hmm. She says, all we ever hear is about, pipelines are bad, and not really why pipelines are bad. They're just bad. But why don't we hear these success stories? And so that really resonated to me that, we should be very proud of, what we've done and very proud of these success stories. And I think this is something that has been a career goal of mine, is to get those stories out there. Now, on the other side of where we're looking at the MRDP and how it can help, I'm going to take a company like LCO Technologies is a great example of this, where they're a Calgary-based company, fantastic technology that they're developing. But to scale that, you need companies to buy into it. And because they have a tech that's a little bit different, right? It's very proven, but it is a little bit different than that business as usual approach. Companies get a little bit hesitant on it. And, it takes a while for them to kind of adopt it, and that would help LCO scale. So that's where I see the MRDP really helping in companies like that they will be able to scale. They'll be able to get more out there. And as you get more out there, you get that bit of a, snowball effect happening where you can develop more, product gets better, and it goes back and forth. The money comes in, the product gets better, the money, it's that thing. So there's lots of other really good Alberta-based businesses out there, and we can go outside Alberta as well, for sure. It's a big oil field. There's a lot of companies out there like that will benefit from this and benefit from the fact that their technology is getting out there and people can try it. And then what they can do after is keep going with it. So maybe they give a try to 20 of them during the MRDP. That could lead to 100 of them, 1,000 of them going out later on. Right. I think that's where I see these small companies really benefiting from it.
So I'm hearing that this is de-risking, projects for operators, but also maybe more specifically for the technology and service providers as well that are looking to deploy and expand the adoption of their new technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's like that kind of snowball effect, right? Where a company has something really good that they want to get out there. It's developed. It's already been through the pilot programs and things like that. It just needs to get out there. But they just maybe they can't afford to. They just don't have that internal investment and the ability to do that. I mean, some of these are very small companies, right? So I think that's where the technology providers are really going to be helped by the program. Is it helps bring in some of that funding. It helps people investing, and it's not just dollars into your company for R&D. This is dollars into the industry for industry to purchase from your company. And then, as we all know, when you purchase something and it works and you like it, you're probably going to go back and purchase more. So I think that's my hope, is to see that into the future. Is, yeah, we did 20 of them here, but we kept on going for years and years after purchasing from that same company.
Right. So we've talked about Alberta quite a bit. Maybe switching over more globally now, we're seeing international markets in Europe and Asia starting to demand lower carbon gas. How does the MRDP help ensure Alberta's natural gas remains competitive and reliable on the global stage?
It's sure been a change over the last number of years. And yeah, we are seeing, the EU, the lower carbon gas being demanded by the EU. I think in Canada, lowering the carbon intensity is one piece of this, for sure, right? So lower carbon intensity gas, we can then proudly say, yes, we do have the lowest carbon intensity gas on the planet. But what will allow us to say that is our reporting, our measurement, right? And I think that's what really differentiates us from some other jurisdictions in the world. There is others that do actively measure and report. Yes, we're not the only ones, but there's others out there that produce a lot of natural gas into the world that will very boldly say that they don't produce any emissions. Well, no, it's not that you don't produce it. It's just that you don't measure it or report it. There's a difference there, right? So I think, what I see out of the program, sure, we get lower carbon intensity in our gas. That is fantastic. That's number one benefit, is that we are lowering emissions, and these projects lower emissions right now, immediately. You change out a chemical pump today, as soon as you turn on that electric pump, you have reduced emissions. That's the beauty of it. This is not, looking years into the future before we get the added benefits of it. It's right now. But the things that I'm not sure that everyone really thinks about in it is that the data that we're going to get out of a project like this, the understanding of how many devices were out there, so that we can get these more accurate baselines and really understand where we're at. I think that was what happened in the kind of that first big batch of projects, like coming into 2017 when we were looking at pneumatics. I used to always say, producers, they know where all of their big facilities are. Right. They've got those mapped out. They know where their compressor stations and that is. They know where most of their wells are. There might be a few missing in the mix. But then when you get into this equipment, do they know where every single vessel is out there when there's hundreds of thousands of them? Yeah, I don't know about that. And then you get even more granular and go into the pneumatics. There is no chance that before that we had anywhere remotely accurate of a number of a baseline, right? So it's programs like this that you go out and you start doing these pneumatics conversions. When we were doing the inventories, for every, say, 5 devices that we would inventory, maybe only one would be, changeable within the offset protocol or require a change. But what you saw was hundreds of thousands of devices be inventoried, which means hundreds of thousands of pieces of data that we can use to understand what our baseline looks like and where we're at. So when we get done this program, I know the goal is, I believe, a 20% reduction in methane. We'll know that because we'll have the data and we'll be able to say, okay, hey, this is what we found, and share that data with regulators, with government, to really understand where we're at and how we move into the future. You have to know where you're at to know where you're going.
Right. You've mentioned previously that a good energy mix is key how does cleaning up natural gas emissions allow it to remain a critical part of the transition alongside renewables such as wind and solar?
Yeah, I think the utopia of all, solar energy or all wind energy, we're just not there right now. I'm also not a person that's going to say that we'll never be there. I think that we're seeing technological advancements that will someday, don't know when that is, right? But someday maybe we can get there with battery storage and, just a more efficient use of energy. But for right now, that good energy mix is very, very important. We need that to have good, reliable energy. And I think that's the key, is reliable energy. There's a lot of places on Earth still that don't have that reliable energy available, right? I think we can take it for granted here that when it's minus 40 outside, you can still plug everything into the wall and we can still get our heat on and things like that. There's places in the world that don't have that. So to me, I would love to see those places have good, reliable energy before we decide to just start radically changing what, our energy looks like, right? Give these other places a higher standard of living with good, clean energy. I mean, we've seen in Alberta just the transition away from coal to natural gas. It's just an evolution, right? And it's cleaner burning. I think the combustion technology has gotten significantly better over the years. So we are cleaner, we are more efficient. And these forms of energy really, they kind of supplement one another. They complement one another. So, I'll never say that solar is bad. Solar has its place, right, for sure. What I wouldn't highly suggest is just putting solar in just for solar's sake. So if you're somewhere around, Edson or Hinton or somewhere like that, where, it's some of the worst solar power available, yeah, why would we put solar farms there? Right. But they sure do work down south, right? Yep. They have a tough time in the winter, but they work. And same with wind. I snowmobile down by Crow's Nest a lot. So you see the windmills at Pincher Creek there all the time. And, that's a really good place for them because the wind blows all the time. So having a very good energy mix, I think, it's really based on geography at times and understanding that, one still needs the other. I don't think we can necessarily just go down a single path and say, well, that's just the way it is and that's the way it's always going to be. We hear the same thing with EVs, right? I know I don't have an EV, but I think they're a fantastic idea for certain applications. The argument that we normally hear is, well, the charging infrastructure is just not there and it'll never be there, so they'll never work. That's not true, right? I think 20 years into the future, we're going to be looking back and saying, oh, wow, they really do work and our infrastructure got better. So I'm a never say never. It's going to work. But yeah, we do need this good energy mix. And I think making sure that we are producing the most clean and responsible energy, which I believe we do in Alberta already, that ensures that natural gas can still be in that energy mix for a long time into the future.
Maybe just tying into that. So you talked about maybe in the future, we'll look back and, see EV infrastructure, EV cars differently than we do now. Maybe in 5 years' time, if we look back on the MRDP program, how would you say we've actually succeeded with our program? What would you define as success?
So I think the easy answer to this is that we met all our KPIs, right? But I'm not going to leave it at that answer. I think, that does show that the program worked. I think if we show that we did have, say, a 20% reduction in Alberta's methane based on the program, fantastic. If we have a good mix of projects, that we have learned about. We have some good data, and the projects were successful and at the lowest dollar per ton possible. Fantastic. Yeah, that is successful. But to me, what I want to look at is that the projects kept on going. And I think that's important that, like I said earlier, sure, we can do 20 of something inside of the program, but I want to see that those companies continued on going, and these small tech companies got to grow their businesses because of it, right? That can be a big part of it. That Alberta Oil and Gas did drop massive amounts of emissions, and maybe more than we expect. That would be great. But I think seeing the work continue on after the funding, that to me would be the true measure of success, and show that we have changed the business as usual mentality and really made a change going forward.
Yeah, I'd love to see some of that momentum as well in 5 years' time. So is there anything we didn't cover about the MRDP or the industry's path forward that you think is important for our listeners to hear?
One thing I will say to any listeners is give it a try. Right? I think we can get stuck in not wanting to be the first one out there. The MRDP it's here. Get your applications in, but try something. Try something out that you wanted to try. Try modifying your operations, to really change the business as usual mentality. Just give it a shot. Anybody that is listening that wants more info, I think this is something that we're really pushing in the MRDP, is that we want to be actively engaging. And that's kind of my job. That's what I'm here to do. Give me a call. Happy to talk about this. Happy to see, lend some expertise on how you might be able to work with this inside of your operations. Site visits, things like that. Just, we're pretty open. We want to work with you. Just give us a call, engage with us on it, and I think we'll all be successful with that.
What message would you like to leave with the operators and community members in those small Alberta towns where this work is actually happening?
So first, I'll say thank you, and I don't think that they probably get thanked enough. We're sitting in the middle of Alberta winter right now, and I know the coldest that I've ever worked at out near Chip Lake, Alberta, was, I think it was about minus 56 on my truck. It was pretty darn cold. That doesn't happen all the time, but Chip Lake's a special little environment of its own. People are out there, the operators, service providers, they're out there working right now, and they work no matter what, cold, heat, mud, snow, good, bad, and ugly. They're working in it. So I would say thank you to all of them, first off. But then I'd also say, be open to some change. I think over the years, just working with all of our shops across Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, and really all over the world, is that, sometimes we're a bit closed-minded. And we just want to do the work that we do, and we just we're comfortable. We don't want things to change that much, but just be open to some change when it comes to this. And we're not trying to hurt the industry by reducing emissions. And this is something that I've kind of made my almost mission statement at Mila, is that we want to strengthen the oil and gas industry through emissions reduction. And I'm going to stand on that. I think we can be a stronger industry. We can be a more profitable, competitive industry worldwide through this emissions reduction work that we're doing. I think it's very important for the future of the industry. So, excited to work with everyone on it. And, for all my friends back in Drayton Valley, if anybody's listening, hi. But yeah, I think, this is going to be very good for the industry, and I just hope that everybody gets actively engaged in it and wants to learn about it.
Blake, based on our discussion today, for any of our listeners who are maybe now excited to participate in the MRDP and get involved, what would you say is the best first step, and how can they learn more about how they can participate?
Oh, the very first step would be to go to Emission Reduction Alberta's website, for sure. eralberta.ca/methane, and you'll get to the program site. On that site, you can find lots of resources. There's FAQs on there, so you can understand if you have questions. Probably somebody else did, so you can probably get a lot of those answered on there. But there's also the program resources that you can go through. There's some YouTube videos of the launch, and when we do webinars, the YouTube videos will be on there as well. And then reach out as well. Follow our social media channels. There's the ERA newsletter that has some valuable information. So, follow Mila on social media. We'll have some pretty exciting videos and stuff coming out that I'm excited to do it. I think it'll be fun. We're really trying to make this kind of a fun and engaging activity. So, follow us there, follow ERA on all the social media channels, and reach out with any questions as well. I'm always happy to have a discussion.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you very much.